All right, just arrived at the job site. We had this demoed. My brother had this one demoed yesterday when I was on a different job, but now we're back after a nice rainstorm. And it's a little wet, but not too bad because we have, there's a sand base on here, so that helps from this clay sticking to your feet. And what we're going to do today, we're going to set some forms both sides of the driveway. We're going to tie some rebar in here, and then we're going to pour it tomorrow. The pour design is going to be, the pour we're going to be doing, we're going to do a color throw on color hardener, ash white. Then we're going to use an antique release, a medium gray. We're going to stamp it with a Belgium slate texture, seamless texture stamp. We're going to cut a band around the perimeter, 1 foot band, and we're going to probably use a stone texture on that 14-inch band, and then texture in the middle, something like that. We'll see what we do in the morning, but today we're just going to do setup. So the idea of these two color choices is the house is the light color, the trim of the house and roof is the dark gray. So we're kind of hitting both colors, and we're just putting it into the concrete work. Here's a few obstacles that were in the way of getting the form in. Pretty loose. We had to get those out of the way because I'm trying to set a form straight up there without having to work around any other items. I just want a nice straight line here all the way up. And we're up here. This job's actually in Fullerton, and we're up in the hills. This ground is has a lot of clay in it. It's very, it's real similar to another job I just completed in Tustin foothills. And the ground's pretty similar to one another. It's all clay. Expands and contracts a whole lot during the seasons, depending on the water that's in the ground. But this has sand. So when you remove this driveway, it was concrete that had been cracked up. It was just a basic concrete driveway, no color, no stamp. That all came out, and underneath that concrete, we had a nice sand base already. It's about 4-inch sand base, which is really ideal for expansive soils because that allows the ground to move and not affect the concrete. So we went with the same base on this. The previous concrete had wire mesh. We're going to go with rebar. Doug right there, he's laying out the rebar grid. Those paint marks represent the spacing on the rebar that we're going to be tying in here. I think we ran out of paint, so he couldn't paint them the other direction. So we just eyeballed that. We know we got an exact 2 foot going that direction because it's all painted out. But going the other direction, we just kind of eyeballed it. So rebar is going to be a little bit more structurally sound than a wire mesh, because you know wire mesh is about a 10 gauge, and rebar here is 3/8 inch. So there's a big difference in the strength when you try to flex. If you were to try to flex something with wire mesh, it's gonna bend. But if you try to flex it with real rebar in it, its likelihood of bending, it's not going to really happen. So this is ideal. A really simple tying procedure here. Just some wire ties and a spinner. All right, guys, we have just completed the setup and we're pretty much ready for concrete. There it is. Number 3 rebar, 2 foot centers. There was wire mesh in here before, but the wire mesh rusted out and completely failed. This is going to be a little bit more structurally sound with some big steel in there, you know. You know, we ordered like 8 yards of concrete, which is about a yard over what it really calls for based on the dimensions. But we came up a little bit short at the end, so we know that this thing went in deep. Either that or we got a short load, but most likely it went in deep is more common. So we ended up re-rodding this just a little bit, and you'll see how we were able to generate enough concrete to get to the end. We're still a yard over on it, so it's still deep. We have Lenny as our pumper here. OC Concrete delivered it. As we're placing the concrete, we're lifting the rebar up, and because it is at 2-foot centers, you don't necessarily have to step on them. Matter of fact, it's actually hard to try to step on them when they're spaced at 2 foot. You actually almost have to try to step on it. So in other words, when we lift it, it stays lifted because we're not stepping on it. We're pouring this very stiff. Luckily, OC Crete, the owner of OC Crete delivered this, so it tells me that he knows what he's doing when he brings it at a decent, like a 4-inch slump. I've had a lot of drivers that'll just bring it out, however, it's easiest, which is usually like at a 6 or 8-inch slump. This particular, this guy actually brought it out right. So, which came in handy because we are on a hillside. He probably when he got the order, he's thinking, well, I'm up in Fullerton. He's got a lot of hills. It's probably on a slope. There's a lot of things you've got to kind of think through when you're doing stuff. So we got 2 wood bow floats going simultaneously because this stuff is so stiff that we got to try to get it laid down. So that's how we got down to the end. We just went up, re-rodded it because we don't have a screed in the middle and we're jogging left to right, pulling that screed over. That left us with a high point in the middle. So we just came right back down through the middle and took it down a little bit, and we made it. So we got color hardener going on right now, and you can tell by the dust. It's a good idea to wear a dust mask in these situations. Even if you're not doing color hardener and you're doing integral, when you get to that release agent, it's a good idea to wear a dust mask, especially if you're doing this a lot. If you're doing it every day, you definitely want a really good dust mask. If you're just doing it once every, 6 months or whatever, you're probably going to live through it and not have any long-term effects. But if you're doing something repetitively over and over and over, you need to think about the long-term effects. This ash white, I believe per bag, I think these are 50-pound bags. Well, actually it comes in a bucket. Yeah, brick forms in a bucket, which is great so that your shelf life is going to be a lot longer on this stuff because it's in a good sealed bucket, so it's not going to get water or moisture in there, which is nice. Plus you have a bucket, which is easier to throw out of than a bag and move around the job site. So I do recommend getting buckets. They do have some color hardeners that come in paper bags, just like the cement and the premix bags, but when you're dealing with color hardener, which is much more expensive, so you really don't want to waste it, and you want to keep it if you don't use it all. You want a place to be able to store it. It's not going to get hard on you in a bag. There's a nice wide Fresno going on here. Because of this time of year, it's cold. We have some work time on this. We do get a little more moisture coming up to the surface, which is ideal for the color hardener because you're throwing a dry powder on concrete and you need something moisture in there to work it into the concrete. You can see as we hit this that we threw color hardener one time at this point. You can see a few gray spots popping through. So now we're going to touch it up again, throw some more color hardener on those dark spots. You don't necessarily have to throw everywhere, but you really want to focus on the dark areas. If you're in a really hot, dry climate and you're throwing color hardener like this, there's a good chance you're going to have to spray some water on the surface to work it in. All right, today I'm doing something different. I'm doing a rolling stamp. Typically I use mats, pound them in. And I'll be doing that on the field here, but on the edge, I'm using this new roller. It's a random stone pattern. This is Marshalltown product, but this is kind of what it's got. Just oddball sized stones with some texture, surface texture on them. And you've got weights. So you can add weights to it. You know, as the concrete gets harder, you add more weight, or you can get on it earlier with no weight. Here's where you hook up your pole. Then you just roll this. What we're gonna do with it, we're gonna cut a joint. This is 14.5 inches wide. So we're gonna put a joint at 14.5 all the way around this driveway. Then we're gonna take this and follow that joint and just roll it in there all the way around. So you'll have a stone border. Then in the middle, we're gonna do texture. We just have some 5x5 with Belgian slate seamless texture that we'll do in the middle. And then if it overlaps over this, it's not gonna matter a whole lot because you've got texture on these stones anyway. So that's the plan. See how it goes as we get through this project. So as you can see down here on the bottom, we're gonna be wet cutting this. So we have a dry line. We're gonna snap some lines on this concrete. We're also gonna cut the joint. We know that the width of that rock and roller by Marshalltown is 14 inches, I believe. So we're gonna cut a joint at 14 inches. That way it'll give us a straighter inside line. Well, now when we roll that roller, we just have to follow that inside line. We follow the inside line with the roller, we know it's gonna be straight. The outside line, because we're matching existing, we have some other obstacles, may not be as straight as this inside joint we're putting in. Also, we're going to make a cut down the middle of the driveway, one in each direction. That's our crack control joints. The initial joining is done with this 5-foot long, 2-inch deep cutter, which gives you a good break through your aggregate very deep. You're pretty much banging off the rebar at this point. But our final joint, it could be a 1/4 inch deep. It could be any depth you want, or you don't even really have to put another joint, a visible joint. It still would crack straight on that line because we've actually separated the aggregate very deep. But we are going to put a final joint right along that same line. And that's going to be 3/4 inch deep, 1/2 inch radius. So this is an 18-inch walking edger, and he has an adjustable joiner that can slide to any width that he wants on that edger. So that's what he's running there to get that outside line and also clean up the joint. Now this is our third throw of the color hardener, pretty much our final throw. And we just spotted it here on a few dark spots. Now we got to trowel that back in. That says rose burrows on it. Yeah. And because we are doing a two-tone with a medium gray, even if you did have a couple dark spots, it actually, now you've got a 3-tone instead of a 2-tone. So that works also. In other words, if you didn't have enough color hardener and you just spotted it, you could go with that too, actually. And that might look good also. Well, it looks like another color hardener throw. So that's the 4th time we've thrown color hardener. And it looks like he was really focusing on the joints at that point. Here's your walking edger, and we've removed the joiner on the outside edge of it. So we're just really catching the edge there. Now the thing about the rocking roller is it has those deep lines in it that we got to get a full impression with, and we still got to pick up the texture of the stone. So we got to get down there a good 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch. So we're going to get on it early with the rock and roller to get the impression at full depth. Now the inside is texture, so there is no deep line, so you can go later on that and get away with it. But in the perimeter, so we're going to stamp the perimeter first and give that inside area a little time to dry. Now you can see the release agent going on. It's an antique release agent, so it does a couple things. It gives you another color, and it also prevents your stamps from sticking. The consistency of it is more, it's kind of like a talcum powder. Don't do it. I don't And Doug is rolling this out right now. And you can see it's making contact with the texture in most places. However, wherever it does it, we're going to use a hand mat, texture mat, and make sure that we have 100% texture all the way through. That's what I was doing. That's what I'm doing right now. I'm running the hand texture mat to make sure that we have a consistent texture all the way through. Because if you don't do that and you're missing some spots of pushing in that antique release agent, you're going to have what I like to call bald spots. Spots where you have no color, no secondary color. So I like to tap it all in to make sure I get 100%. The important thing about the rock and roller is you're getting those deep grooves to create that fake rock look. So you can texture. You could just run our big mats. We're going to run some 5x5s over the entire center. And if you wanted to, you could take those 5x5s over your stone border and then just clean out your joints again, just like we're doing right here with this roller. And what I do a lot of times is I'll take my blower and I'll blow off the powder so I can see what I'm doing. Because without removing the powder, a lot of times you can't see what's really going on. It's kind of like guesswork. So if you use the blower, blow some of the dust out of the way, you can see where you're at. Now, in order to do stamped concrete really right, you really got to pay attention to the details, like blowing the dust out, looking at the joints, make sure that they continue all the way to the line and to the sides. Make sure that you have texture on every stone. Little things like that make a big difference when you come back to do your final rinse. All that will show up. We're using just a dash brush to broadcast the color. That way you get a nice smooth flow. Sometimes if you pick it up with your hand and try to throw it down, it actually hits the concrete hard enough to make an indentation. And you'll see that too when you come back for the rinse. So you want to fluff your antique release agent in the bucket, fluff it, and then dash or dip your brush and broadcast. Same with the color hardener. You want to fluff that as well when you're throwing that out. This is a Roman slate pattern. The Roman slate is kind of the medium of texture mats. It's not your old granite and it's not your Italian slate. It kind of has a little bit more texture than the Italian, but less than the old granite. And there's a lot of other ones out there, but that's kind of your low impact to high impact textures. Now I've got the roller on a pole. Now I'm just touching up all the edges and all the joints, because after you go over it with a texture mat, some of your joints are going to close. You really can't see it because there's so much powder on it, but you just have to know that maybe they closed up. So you just run them just to be on the safe side. All right, let's break it down. Here's what we had to do. We jointed the perimeter at 14.5, the same size as that rock and roller, random stone roller tool from Marshalltown. Then we got on it a little early with that because it goes a lot deeper than the texture. So you have those deep joints. So we hit that early, waited another 45 minutes, then we textured the field. Then as we went through everything on the stamp, we touched it up with a roller joiner to kind of clean up and continue all the lines on through, open them up after any joint closures, and this is where we stand. We're going to come back here in 2 days and do a rinse, pressure wash, clean it all up, and that's the real reveal, what we're going to be looking at long term after we pressure wash. We'll see how that looks. I think it's going to look great. Notice the color of the antique release is the same as the trim on the house. Then the base color is really similar to the house color as well. So it's going to complement each other. Basically is what we're going for here. All right, I'm back 2 days after the pour. We're getting ready to start rinsing this. This is what it looks like 2 days later. A lot of dust still on there. We're gonna capture all that. We got the wet vac here. We're gonna sweep it first, dry sweep, get the bulk of the dust. Then we'll pressure wash everything. We'll dam it down here. We'll create a dam, wet vac it out, dump it in the bushes up here, and we'll be good to go. I'm excited to see how this looks. Let's get down to business. So we waited 2 days before we came back to do this rinse. If you come back any earlier than that, you're gonna probably rinse all your antique release out, or you could scratch the surface. So you gotta wait a minimal 2 days to get back at it and do this rinse. So we're dry sweeping it with a horsehair broom right now, which isn't gonna do any damage to the concrete, and it picks up all that really fine powder. It's like a talcum powder. And you can reuse that if you're in a pinch and you want to save some of this antique release. You put it back in a bucket and reuse it again, and you'll probably come up with if you used a full bucket, you could probably salvage a half a bucket. Then is it? Which I've had to do in a pinch on multiple pours, same colors, run out of release, go back, sweep it up, and now you can keep pushing through. This release agent got pretty dirty with leaves and stuff, so it's not a really perfect. I guess you could filter it out if you really had to. So I just lined the bucket with a 5-gallon bag, trash bag. That way I can tie it, throw it in the trash can, and away it goes. Getting the wet vac set up down below, I've created a dam in the gutter. That way the water that comes down this driveway will get behind the dam that I'm creating, and I'll just run the wet vac. Every time it fills up, I'll roll it up the hill, dump it in those bushes up there. So we probably picked up, by dry brushing, about 90% of the excess powder. Now here's kind of what it looks like on a close-up of the initial pressure wash. Now you look at it this, and now you can go, if you want to remove more of the secondary color, the dark medium gray release, you can mix up yourself some muriatic acid in a garden pump-up sprayer at about an 8-to-1 ratio, and spray that on there, and then pressure wash it again, and take another look at it and see if you want to go further. But you can keep going to as far as you want on the removal of the secondary color, depending on how much acid you want to use. So you can see this is without the muriatic acid at this point, but we're going to hit it again with some acid, and you can see the change in it. The nice thing about pressure washing your release agent off is at the same time you can pressure wash everything around you. The car, the garage door, the house, the adjoining concrete. So you end up with a really clean, looking like you were never there type look. This is 2 days after the pour, and you can see the color. This is pretty much the true color it will be long term, because we use that color hardener. Now, if we try, you couldn't do this light of a color with integral. You can only go darker. You can't go lighter. So
acid
that's why color hardener.
We're gonna get some more of the secondary off.
Lighter look than the natural dried concrete. Also, it gives you a harder surface, so it's less likely to stain, chip, fade, a lot of things. Now I have the muriatic acid mixed up in that little pump-up sprayer. Okay, so the way I do the muriatic acid is I'll take a section of the concrete, I'll spray that entire section, and then we pressure wash, and then we move to the next section. That way we know where we hit and we haven't hit. And you can see the difference that this muriatic acid is making right off the gate. It's really taking that residue off, and you're really showing a lot more contrast with that acid. Now, if you don't like the contrast, a heavy contrast, you can just leave it as is, and that's fine too. There was a look there. You can see half the driveway was completed with the acid and half wasn't. So it's really just a matter of preference at that point. But you can let me know in the comments what you like better, pre-acid wash or after. All right, that wraps up this project. It turned out beautiful. Take a look at that. Here's a nice, tight, close look at this. Turned out beautiful. In about 30 days, we could put a nice high gloss lacquer-based sealer on here with some non-slip in it because we're on a hill here. And that would look really great. It's probably what we'll end up doing inevitably here. Take a look at that garage door. See how our concrete's below top of garage floor, about 2 inches in the middle? That's because of this heaving of the ground. It's heaved the garage floor in the middle. But we put our concrete in straight just in case he wants to address that issue and get his door fitting nice and tight in there. We can remove that garage floor and fix that. But thank you for watching the video. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, hit the notification button. That way you'll be notified as soon as I upload the next video. Have a good day.